Welcome to my podcast series, Independence for Life, diving into management, instruction, and guidance of your lifestyle as you continue your journey through life and into retirement and older age. Hi, my name is Nancy Brenicardi. I am an integrative nutrition health coach, nutritionist, certified caregiver, and fitness professional and instructor. I work independently in every capacity as described. I am the creator of Independence for Life. I am continuing my preparation of upcoming podcasts to help you on your journey of independence for life. So let's begin that journey today and keep in mind your why for being here. And being healthy is not about any weight loss that you may experience, but about the life you gain by being a healthy weight, which is different for everyone. In my podcast numbers 1 and 2, I provided the basis for why I started, Independence for Life and what it is. But basically, I'm here to spread the word about the importance of movement, proper nutrition, and the preparation for older age, and to educate people about movement and continued mobility with exercise and proper nutrition. It is never too early and is never too late to start. Today, podcast number 11, I'm going to talk about salt, which is also known as sodium chloride. It is essential for human life, but we also use it primarily for flavoring foods, preserving foods. It is a vital nutrient for nerve and muscle function. So I'm going to go over some examples of how we use it. Number 1 would be seasoning, which helps reduce bitterness and maybe even increase sweetness. It also is a food flavor enhancer. We use it in food preservation, which it helps stop bacteria from growing on food like meats and cheeses. And it's a cheap, non-toxic preservative. If you've listened to any of my prior podcasts, I did a whole podcast on preservatives and additives. So salt is non-toxic. But we also have to know our limits on that too, and I will be getting into that. Another use of salt would be cooking, like baking and curing, maybe brining meats. And then also it's used as residential and in industrial by way of melting ice, water softeners, chemical manufacturing. So salt has a lot of good uses, but again, moderation will be key here. So some facts about salt. It is an essential nutrient. It's important for fluid balance, nerve function, and muscle contraction. It's an essential mineral. So another fact would be its impact. Excess salt can cause high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. So I'm going to take a step back a second, and I'm going to tell you my story about salt and why I'm bringing this to you today. So being a health coach, being a fitness professional, I am always aware of what I'm putting in my mouth, how foods make me feel. I really pay attention to what happens when I eat something, how it makes me feel, whether immediately or later on. I'm very curious about food, so I'm always very aware. And I'm just trying to stress that because I didn't realize what I was doing with salt and what happened to me. So as much as I am aware of what I'm doing and trying to take care of myself through food, trying to exercise as much as possible, I try to get in 5 days a week, salt got me. So here's what happened. I didn't realize the snowball effect that salt had. So, and the foods that came with salt already, I was adding salt to it. And I think because of that, my salt taste, it wanted more and more. It wasn't like an addiction. I just needed more and more salt. And I didn't realize. And then I started feeling, my heart just started feeling funny, but I just kept continuing on. And I think this, I don't know how far back this goes, how many far back of months of this excess salt I was doing. It wasn't a long time before my heart started trying to tell me something. So one night I'm sitting there and I'm like, my heart was palpitating for about, not continuously, but enough where it made me worry for about 3 hours. And I'm like, what is that? I'm like, why is this happening? So I just would monitor myself over the next week or so. And I was having these palpitations and some aching and some pressure, but not as extreme as that one particular night. So over the next couple of weeks, I would just pay attention to what is happening. And it got to be where it wasn't going away. So I said, okay, I need to go to see a doctor because this is not going away. So I went to the ER after work because I'm a workaholic. So I go to the ER and they take my blood pressure, and I was so into what was happening with me, I didn't realize how high my blood pressure was. And I kept asking them questions, and they didn't really mention my high blood pressure. They just wanted to put me on a drug. They didn't ask me any questions about who I was, what I ate, what my exercise was, why was my blood pressure so high. They didn't ask me any of that. They just immediately wanted to say, we want to put you on a statin, with zero consultation about anything about me. And I was like, what is happening here? So once I knew about the high blood pressure, which I've never, ever, ever had in my life, I'm usually 110/70. This, I can't remember what the numbers were, but it was like 130 over, I don't remember. But the point was, it was high for me, and it's very unusual. So what I did was, when I went home, I was disappointed by how I was treated in the ER. And that doesn't surprise me, and because I have a long history of being disappointed in the medical field, but that's a story for another day. Anyway, so I went home and I researched what makes high blood pressure. And what popped out to me was salt. And I was like, oh, so I did this to myself. So what I did was I backed off of salt. Well, okay, on the way home, I picked up a blood pressure monitor. And then I Googled how to use that also. And that's where the salt popped up. And for the next 3 to 4 days, I took a journal out and I wrote down what my blood pressure was, what I was eating, and how I was feeling. After 3 days of no salt or hardly any salt at all, my blood pressure went back to normal. So we need to really think about what we're eating, because I will talk to a lot of people and they're like, oh, I eat healthy and I'm fine, I'm this, I'm that, and I'm that way too. But apparently I was hurting myself without realizing it. So there are salt alternatives, which I will get into that with you as well, but we do need real salt in our lives every day, but not in excess. So point being is, let's watch our salt, how much we're taking in, and let's really look at how we're eating. How is it really making us feel? When I journaled, anytime I journal my food, it really is eye-opening. It really makes me look at what I'm doing, which I don't do that often because I am very repetitive with my eating habits. And I've been doing the same thing since 2008. But if I'm ever feeling funny, I really look at okay, what was different that I ate, and how come I'm feeling this way? So the healthiest of the healthy people, we all have to pay attention. The people that are not healthy, we all have to pay attention. The point is, we all have to pay attention. So let's watch our salt. So since that time, I use different types of salt. I still use the regular salt because it is an essential mineral. We do need to have it, but it is so reduced and I feel so much better. It only took me 3 days to get back to where I should be. So that's my story. Another fact about salt, there is a variety of salts. There's many types, but they're similar in nutritional value by providing sodium. Like you'll see salts like Himalayan and kosher, maybe iodized. They're about the same nutritionally. And then there are the sources of salt. There's ocean or underground mines. And next we're going to talk about recommended daily allowance. So listen to this number, please. less than 2,300 milligrams a day. That's about 1 teaspoon. And if you take a teaspoon and you fill that up with salt, to me, it looks like a lot. And I don't know if that's because of what I went through or just it really just seems like a lot. So let's not shoot for that whole teaspoon. Let's have that be our guide. So that or less. And that's for adults. The actual average in this country is significantly higher than what is recommended, and it's about 3,400 milligrams. So we're trying to shoot for 2,300 or less, but what's happening in this country is about 3,400 or higher. It's in foods that we eat, right? You go to restaurants. What do restaurants do? They enhance it, right? Salt, sugars. They want you to come back. So that's where we can get into trouble. So go out to eat like you normally would. Just be mindful of your salt for the rest of the day, either leading up to or after. Okay, so just be mindful of what we're doing. Monitor the salt usage, right? Read the labels. So if you're reading a label, and I did a podcast about reading labels, so check that one out. So if reading a label, so just a quick guide under sodium, if it's 5% or less, then that's pretty low. If it's 20% or more, that's pretty high. So your rule of thumb is if it's a bad ingredient, always look for lower. If it's something we need, go on the higher side. And source awareness. This is what I was just talking about at the restaurant. Most sodium comes from processed foods and restaurants and not necessarily the salt. So mindfulness, processed foods. It's like I said earlier, right? It's a preservative. They add it. They want to keep that food around. They want to keep that food on the shelf. They want to keep that food tasting good. They want to keep you coming back. So source awareness. You may see the words salt and sodium, right? What's the difference? These terms are used interchangeably, and yet they are not the same. Salt is a compound, and sodium is a mineral element within it. Let's talk about what if I don't get enough? Well, that's a real thing. There's a condition called hyponatremia. Blood sodium levels are low, causes cells to swell and lead to dizziness, headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, and confusion. Also, an increased risk of death has been linked to low sodium diets, but more research is needed, even though the results found are strongly influenced by one study. So they're still, working on finding that information out. The flip side, some people benefit from a restricted sodium diet. People with salt sensitive, high blood pressure. So now I would consider myself salt sensitive, right? So I just am always aware now, and that's okay. I'm getting what I need. I'm just no longer doing it in excess and mindlessly and continuing to add salt on top of salt. What happens if I get too much? Well, you get immediate fluid retention that can lead to bloating, swollen hands and feet, and intense thirst. These symptoms don't last that long because your kidneys are helping balancing them out. So you may not notice, that side effect of too much. How about water retention to dilute too much salt, which causes puffiness and bloating? High blood pressure. Too much salt makes it difficult for the kidneys to eliminate fluid, which raises the blood pressure. And I didn't tell you that other piece. I was born with one kidney. How about that? So I was really doing a doozy to myself. But, I paid attention. My body was screaming at me, and I listened. How about getting too much salt? You get thirst, headaches, possible high blood pressure related symptoms, long-term effects, cardiovascular disease. High blood pressure strains the arteries, which may lead to heart disease and stroke. You also have kidney damage. Overworking them may cause disease or stones. Sodium buildup in your body causing fluid retention, and your heart has to work harder because of it. And it places pressure on the vessels in every organ. And frequent consumption long-term of salt strains the heart, blood vessels, and the kidneys. Let's look at ways that we can reduce our salt intake. Limit processed, packaged, and fast foods because you cannot control the amount of salt in these products, but you can control the size of your portion. And if you heard the beginning of that sentence, I said limit. I don't agree with processed, packaged, and fast foods. However, I believe in moderation, not deprivation. So if we could just limit and control what we can control to help ourselves. Number 2 is read the labels for the salt content. Being aware, source awareness. How about be aware of how much salt you're taking in and maybe try to spread it out throughout the day. So maybe try to avoid that puffiness, right? That water retention. We have it all at once. Our body's like, whoa. So let's try to help ourselves out. Add salt in while cooking or rely on other salt-filled ingredients. What do I mean? If you're using salted butter, we can use the salt in that butter in our dish as opposed to adding more salt on top. But if that is not salty enough, I will be getting into alternatives for you in this podcast. How about we try seasoning food with herbs and spices to try to crowd out salt? And you'll hear me use that term in my past podcasts and my future podcasts to come, crowding out. How to get rid of something? How do you control portions? How do you control whatever? Crowd it out. So example, you have all these Twinkies. You're like, I have to eat 10 Twinkies. You're like, I don't want to eat 10 Twinkies. How can I crowd it out? Cover it all up with broccoli, right? Crowd that Twinkie out. I know that sounds silly. It's just a colorful picture. I'm trying to be silly with my example. So you're crowding out those Twinkies. You're pushing them away. Okay. You're trying to give yourself wholesome produce. How about increase your potassium? Okay, because potassium promotes excretion through urine, reduces retention in the body, acts as a buffer against salty diets. And then your potassium sources, baked potatoes, squash, leafy greens, bananas, avocado, beans, lentils, nuts, dairy products. Okay, so let's back that up for a second, right? If you look at some of these potassium sources, to me and probably the entire world, potatoes need salt. Avocado can use salt. Nuts, they're a little bit better with salt, right? So it's like you got to juggle that. You got to find that balance or use salt or alternatives. But these are good sources for potassium to try to crowd out salt. Be aware of labels claiming reduced salt. It just means that the product has about a quarter less sodium than normally present, but it still may be too much for you. Let's start with whole, fresh, and unprocessed foods to crowd out the processed, packaged, and fast foods. Even fresh items that are packaged can be packaged with a little bit of salt. Maybe you'll see canned green beans or something. You know, they're now starting to label them with no salt, right? So pick and choose, be aware, source awareness. But with the whole, fresh, and unprocessed foods is your best way to control your salt intake. Fresh or frozen produce is better than canned, okay, because there tends not to be any salt at all. So again, source awareness. Your commonly salted foods when you're at the grocery store, frozen meals. Have you ever looked at the package of, of a frozen dinner? The salt content is astounding. Any canned or packaged soups, again, loaded with salt. Snack foods like potato chips, obviously, soy sauce, salad dressing, condiments, just lots of salt and all this stuff. So if you're having a meal, just take a glance and just see what you're actually eating and how you're feeling. And maybe, why do I feel dizzy? Or how come I have water retention? Or how come I got heart palpitations? Look at what you're eating and look at how much you're moving or not moving, right? Avoid trading salty foods for added sugars or saturated fats, because once you start taking out okay, let me back it up. These are processed packaged foods at the grocery store. Once you start reducing or taking away the salty, they want to add in the sugar or the saturated fat because they're flavor enhancers. They want you to keep coming back. So the more ammunition I can give you, the more you can arm yourself and pick and choose your battles at will. Let's get into the last topic of salt today, which would be salt alternatives. And not every single salt alternative is a good choice. So I'm going to try to give you some good choices here, and I just want to give you an example. I cook for some of my clients, and I will grab spices off of the grocery store shelf just to give, maybe chicken a little bit of a zing or whatever. So I picked this one seasoning. I forget what it was. Maybe it doesn't matter what it was, and I wasn't thinking that I had to look at the ingredients list of a seasoning container, and on the back of it, it said MSG. I'm like, for seasoning, for spices and herbs, you're putting... So, again, reading everything, even when you think you don't have to read, just check it out. So your salt or alternatives. Earlier today, I mentioned herbs and spices. And try to jazz it up a little more with that as opposed to just straight up salt. What happened to me when I backed off of the salt? So now if I go to a restaurant and I take a bite of something, I feel like I just ate the ocean. And prior to what happened to me, I would have been okay with that amount of salt. So it's that snowball effect, right? And that's what happened. So I'm going to assume that may happen to others, that snowball effect with the salt. So if I go out and I eat something, I'm like, wow, that's so salty. Or now, since I cook for some of my clients, I've also backed off of salt there too. And they're like, where'd the salt go? And then I have to explain myself. And they're like, okay, because salt really is to taste. And you can always add it. Taking it away is more difficult. So just, again, source awareness. Trying different things to flavor enhance your food. Starting off as bland as possible and then going up from there because it's hard to take away. Salt or alternatives. You can add acids like lemon juice or vinegar. Those are very, pungent and fun. Savory ingredients like nutritional yeast or miso. Nutritional yeast, actually, it's very flavorful. I don't know if you've ever had it. If you have not, give it a try. You don't know unless you try. A similar salty taste. There are things called potassium chloride-based salt substitute, like no salt. But please be careful there because that's not good. Okay, so I'm just letting you know what's out there, and that particular salt substitute, no salt, that's not good for us because of the potassium chloride-based. It's just not good for us. There are salt-free blends like Mrs. Dash. I'm sure you've seen that on the shelf. I think it's in a yellow container. But again, just check the ingredients for other chemicals. And the last one is something that I just recently got into. It's called green salt, and it actually has more health benefits to it than just salt by itself, which is an essential mineral. So green salt. So let me tell you about it briefly. It has a salty taste with less sodium. And it comes from the sea succulent Salicornia. It's nutrient-dense, plant-based, from 100% dehydrated sea asparagus. It has about half of the sodium than regular salt, supports heart health and blood pressure management, and it contains potassium, magnesium, and vitamins. I found it on Amazon. Yes, it's more expensive than your regular salt, but you don't need a lot, and you're being proactive, right? And investing in yourself. So, table salt is okay. Teaspoon or less per day. Look for alternatives, herbs and spices, lemon juice, vinegar, nutritional yeast, miso. Mrs. Dash, green salt. There's plenty of things that we can try and instead of just pouring on the salt like I was. So let's be kind to ourselves. And podcast number 12, that's coming up next. I'm going to be going over summer foods like salad dressing or barbecue, because I think that's important because the summer is coming up and I really want to go over salad dressing in depth about the ingredients and what's happening with that. So thank you for being here today. My name is Nancy Brunicardi, Independence for Life. I can be reached. My email address is IND, the number 4, LIFE, LLC at gmail.com. Keep listening to my podcast. Take care of yourself, and thank you for being here.